I was bullied a lot. I would come home and I would just cry and my mom would have to comfort me. I remember the first time I was in the shower and I was like, am I gay? I didn't know if my parents were going to abandon me. And a drag queen approached me and she said, you should become a stripper. I went from shop boy to then working at actual like nightclubs. I was stripping, I was doing all these things that I never imagined myself to do. And I just kept telling myself, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. One day you're going to achieve your dreams. One day you're going to find your Prince Charming. And I was getting more abused, more empty. I was so depressed. I would cry every day. And so I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to kill myself tomorrow. Like, that's it. I'm going to be done with this.
Hello and welcome back to the Almost False podcast, where I interview regular people with incredible stories. Today's guest is a former gay stripper, and although that sounds kind of crazy, I'm sure a lot of people are going to relate with his story. He talked about what it was like growing up as a more feminine boy and how that affected him later on in life. This video will be shocking to many of you, regardless of where you stand on the topic of sexuality. But if you want to understand the story, you have to be patient and make it all the way to the end. With that being said, let's dive right into the life story of Samuel Perez.
Well, since I was so different from other boys in my life, I was bullied a lot. And so I started being bullied like around third grade. That was when I was introduced to a new school in a new county. And people they would just bully me. I was very feminine in the way that I talked, in the way that I moved. I would move my hands like this when I would talk. I'd be like, hi guys. I don't know why. It was just like natural. And so I carried that well into middle school. By middle school, I had kind of learned how to hide that because I was bullied. I would come home and I would just cry, and my mom would have to comfort me, and I'd say like, why do people hate me, or like why do these guys want to make fun of me, and why don't I have friends? And so I learned throughout the years like I can't act like this and I can't be like this. And it was like very shameful for me. And so I considered my own personality to be hostile to others and to myself. And it was like just shame and guilt. I was like, I need to change things about me in order to be accepted for other people. And so when I got to middle school, I knew I had to date girls because guys were dating girls during this time. Middle school is like, when you start getting all the hormones and you're going through the puberty, and then you're like, I want to date something. And so for me, I wasn't feeling anything towards girls. I could look at a girl and it would be like looking at like a brick wall. Like there was nothing going on. Like there's no attraction whatsoever. I don't see anything that I like there. And I didn't necessarily see that in guys. I think what I saw in guys was there was a mystery of like, I'm not like them and they're not like me, and I don't understand them. And so when I was in middle school, I would just get girlfriends. And I was a pretty good looking kid, I would say. I could have been like a Disney Channel, kid. And so I like these green eyes and I guess a good face. And so it wasn't hard for me to like get girlfriends. And I would end up dating like some of the prettiest girls in school, and all of the boys would be jealous of me. But it was mostly because I could just like relate to them and listen to them. And so while most boys, they didn't understand girls, I knew all about girls. So I'd just befriend them and then I would date them. And then people wouldn't ask me questions and they wouldn't bully me. They wouldn't say I was gay because I had a girlfriend. So it was like I had I had a beard. That's how people would say it in the gay world, like you have a beard. But then that's when I met my best friend, and he kind of introduced me into a whole nother way of thinking, because I had never had guys who had any interest in me whatsoever. I never had guy friends growing up. Like they would just avoid me like the plague. I only had girlfriends from when I was little all the way to middle school. And this was the first guy. This was the first guy who like truly paid attention to me. I don't even remember how we met. I think it was like an acquaintance in class. At the time, I had a best friend who was also lesbian, and I was friends with her because I just admired her willingness to not care what people thought, and more people were accepting lesbianism as opposed to like being gay, which was like ironic.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was funny in a way. It was like more like the students were more horrible. They were more homophobic towards men than they were towards the women, because like, oh, if you're lesbian, like that's hot and like that's cool, right? Like if you're gay, like you're weird, and that's what I was growing up around. So she came out of the closet. She was telling everyone that she was gay, and she was one of my best friends, and I just loved her like gangster attitude towards like people. And she didn't care what other people thought about her. And for me, I wanted to be that way, but I did care what people thought about me. I guess it was like goes back into like perfectionism and all that stuff. And so I met my best friend in middle school, who ultimately I went on to actually fall in love with, or I would say fall in lust with now in my life. But I thought that that was love. And so I got like obsessed with this boy because he was like, that was around the time that I got my first cell phone. And he started texting me. I got his number, and he would just check in on me. He would like share with me music. He would ask me questions. I was like, oh my gosh, like this guy, like he cares about me. And I started getting like butterflies in my stomach. I started feeling all these things I'd never felt before. And then I started to realize, I'm like, this is what everyone's been talking about. Like this is what guys have been feeling towards girls. Like I had never felt any of this before in my life. So I was developing an attraction to him. Every time I would see him, it was like, oh my gosh, like my heart would skip a beat. Like he would come into class and like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like my feelings were so strong as a kid. When you're first getting, like you're going through those
Yeah.
hormonal changes and everything is so strong. That's how it felt. Like he would walk in the classroom and I was just like, oh my gosh, like he's here. Like I have to talk to him, and like I had to stop myself from talking to him so I didn't look clingy.
Mhm.
And so it was all very new to me, and yeah, and so that's kind of how it started to discover. I remember the first time I was in the shower, and I was thinking about these emotions and these feelings that I was having for my best friend who was a guy, and I was like, am I gay? And I remember like thinking, just even thinking it felt like illegal. Like I felt like I was gonna be like I was gonna be killed on the spot by God. Like I could not, like that was something that I didn't want to go to in my head. Like it was almost like God could read my thoughts, and I knew that it was bad. And so even to like think it and say it out loud, like, Samuel, like, are you gay? Like, am I gay? It was like a really big deal. It was like an open door. I was like, I really like this guy. I can't stop thinking about this guy. I find him to be attractive and I love spending time with him. I think I might be gay. And it's not just this guy. Like now I'm starting to see attraction in like a lot of guys, because before I didn't really have a headspace for it. Like I just looked at guys and I was like, "Oh, I wish I could be like them. Like they really like they attracted me. I didn't understand them at all. That's what attracted me to them. But now it was becoming like sexual with this specific best friend, and that was moving into all other kind of guys in my grade as well. And so that was the first time I kind of really came to understand. I'm like, I think I might be gay. I like my best friend. I think I have attractions towards dudes. And I was, oh my gosh, I was terrified. I was absolutely like, I didn't know what was gonna happen within my relationship to God, or what God was thinking. I tried not to even go there. Um, I would say I felt like I was a prisoner in my own mind.
And you talked about also being scared to show that from a young age. You understood that this was not something that was viewed in a positive light, and you wanted to hide it. But now it was getting really hard to hide it, and you were starting to think more and more that you were gay. So my question is, how did you finally come out to your parents? Because that probably was a big challenge.
Yeah, I think that was the scariest day of my life. I think if you can come out to your parents who are super religious, you can do anything. Like you are a superhero. I just want to say that. It took so much guts. It took everything in me. I didn't know if my parents were going to abandon me. I had heard horror stories of people freaking out, parents freaking out when you confess something like, I, I'm attracted to the same sex. And I was scared that my parents were going to abandon me. I was scared of what they were going to think of me, how they were going to treat me from that point on, whether their perception of me was going to change. It was like not just them, but my whole family. Everyone around me was going to know something that I had kept secret for such a long time. I knew I didn't like girls. I didn't necessarily think I was gay, but I knew I was different. And so for that big secret to come out, I mean, I didn't even like, I thought about the future and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to drink alcohol, because I'm scared that when I drink alcohol, I'm going to tell somebody, that I'm different. So I like I said, I felt like a prisoner in my mind. Um, I was very scared to tell my mom. And I remember I came home from school one day and I just, knew I needed to tell her because I had made like this pact with my best friend at the time, the lesbian. And and she said, I'll come out to my parents if you come out to yours. I said, okay. She didn't come out to her parents, which sucked. But skipping forward. But I did. I got home and I said, it was like word vomit. I was like so nervous. I told my mom, I'm like, Mom, I need to talk to you. And once it came out, I knew there was no going backsies. I was like, I gotta say it now. She's gonna expect something. So we sat down in my bed. We were in my room, and I looked her in the eye and I said, Mom, you know how you said that you would love me no matter what? And she's like, yes. I said, well, I think I'm gay and I like men. Like I like my best friend. And then that's when she presented me. She said, I love you. I care about you. And if it was up to me, I would accept you, but it's not up to me. It's what God thinks. And God doesn't want that for your life. And if you don't follow God, like you're going to go to hell. And I don't want you to go to hell. And so I was like, I don't want to go to hell either, Mom. Like, and I'm like, but I can't help this. And she's like, okay, well, would you want to get help? Would you want me to, help you with these attractions and these feelings? And I said, yeah. And so my poor mom, I love my mom to death. She did such an incredible job as a mom. She went online. She asked for prayer in many ministries. She started Googling. I mean, my mom barely knew English. Like she was Spanish speaking. She went through her university, like listening to recordings and translating the recordings of the professors and then studying and then graduated top of her class. She's incredibly smart. But like she would go on Google and like try to find like help for me. And she didn't even know English. Like it was insane. Like she only knew a little bit. But yeah, there was very few ministries that were actually even dedicated to bringing help to people. This was around the ending of Exodus Ministries, which was a very big ministry. Many people consider it to be like a conversion ministry, a conversion camps, and they were starting to thin out at this point. This was around, I think, 2008 or 2009. And the only ministry, actually, I want to say this, the only ministry that helped my mom during that time, that actually answered her email and sent her a prayer request and said, we're praying with you, was actually surprisingly Joel Osteen's ministry. She reached out to a lot of local churches, a lot of different ministries, and Joel Osteen's church was the only one that said, we want to be there for your son. We want to be praying for your son. Here's a list of things that you can pray for. We'll be praying for him, and you can also pray for him with this list. So no matter what people say about Joel Osteen and prosperity ministry, like at least they're putting all that money to good use. Like they really are helping people. And my mom was eternally grateful for their response. Some people didn't even respond to her. And then she took me on a journey of trying to help me by sending me to Exodus Ministries and pretty much any church, any pastor who would sit down and listen to me. And meanwhile, I was just like on top of cloud nine. I was like, I finally came out of the closet. Like I can tell everyone. And I can tell this guy that I like him. He had actually called me sort of like around this time. And he said he was like high on drugs or something, like he was on mushrooms. My middle school was like in the ghetto. So we were doing all types of crazy stuff. And he'd called me and he's like, hey, I just want you to know I really care about you and I really love you. And I was like, oh, like I love you too, on the phone. And he's like, no, like I want you to tell me like you love me, like you really, really love me. And I had like a close friendship with him, very close friendship with him, but I didn't think that he had like feelings for me the way that I had feelings for him. So when he said that, I was like you love me? Oh my gosh. I was like, okay, well, like I love you too. And then he was like, tell me louder. And I was like stupid, like kid stuff. I was like, I love you, like on the phone. And when we got off the phone, I remember just feeling like I was like hit with a bunch of drugs at that moment. Like I know why people do cocaine, because if it's anything like that, it was insane. Like I floated to my bed. And then the next morning, I planned on reaffirming what he said in person when he's supposedly sober. And so I got my little binder and I printed out like a little like stickers to give to him. And I approached him in the hallway and I told him, I love you, like just going off the conversation that we had the night before. And he said, "What the hell? I don't love you." And he pushed me and I fell on the ground and I was like devastated. Like he pushed me in front of everyone. I was humiliated and I just started to cry and it was like super traumatic. I was like so much trauma from that moment. I was like, "What do you mean?" Like I was just so confused. And then that's when my best friend came and she tried to like, wipe away my tears. And I was just like, this guy's playing games with me. Like he says that he loves me and I thought he loved me. And like it was so confusing. I mean, it sounds confusing. So you can imagine just like me like going through it. I was so confused.
Right. I want to go back to when you talked about conversion camps and what you did. First of all, I think it's a shame that nobody answered just Joel Osteen's ministry, which is not the one that you want to answer if you have the choice to, but you didn't have any other choice. But how were those conversion ministries for you? You talked about Exodus ministry. There's a lot of people that are super against it. They say that it's super evil. And I don't think it's really talked about from people that have been there, that have experiences. Can you explain what happened in there and if that had any kind of positive or negative effect in your life?
Yeah, there was positives and there was negatives. I would say when it comes to Exodus, like I said, it was coming upon the close. I went to their official last conference, and I think this was their third to last conference or something like that. And so I got the end of it, and I was not really expecting much. Like my mom, at this point, I was already going into high school. I had finished my little debacle with the best friend at the time, and that didn't work out. He just continued to reject me, and so that went nowhere. But my mom, she really wanted me to go to Exodus, and I didn't want to go because I was already in high school at this time, and I was like, I just like I'm gonna be gay, mom, like just like accept it. um, but she forced me to go to this one conference. It was like in West Virginia, I think West Virginia or North Carolina, I don't remember, and somewhere around there. and I was the youngest boy in all of the conference. There was people there who were like in their 20s or 30s. I remember they asked people to stand up. Like, if you're under 20, stand up. If you're under 19, stand up. If you're under 18, stand up. And then when they said, like, if you're 17, like, stand up, I was the only one. And like this auditorium, full auditorium, I would say probably maybe like 400, 500 people. And so I was like so embarrassed. I didn't know what to do. Or like I'm sorry, I was either like 17 or 16 or I don't even know. I think even maybe younger. I don't know how old you are when you're a freshman. Under 18. And so I would say that the positive thing that I took from the Exodus Ministries was that there is this really incredible guy. He actually gets a lot of flack. He's still doing, I would say, help in ministry. Well, ministry for LGBTQ and to help them. His name is Ricky Shillette, and he runs a ministry in Texas. He's one of the only other ministries currently that are still trying to help LGBTQ people. And I remember listening to his teaching. He talked about how one person might come to become attracted to men. And I liked it a lot. It captivated me because he presented this idea of like a manly man and then like a sensitive man. And then the sensitive like boy would grow up to like, feminine things and blah, blah, blah. And then the manly boy, he would grow up to really idolize his dad and then, maybe suffer in this area. So the guy like basically summed up my entire life on his like whiteboard. It was like he knew me without even knowing me. I was like, how does he know my life? And then these two men, they both can struggle with SSA. So it was like he had an origin or at least a psychological understanding of how attraction, sexuality works. We know that each one of us, none of us are born with a sexuality. When we come out of the womb, we like to say, I was born this way. Like we were not born that way. Like no one is born gay, straight. We're not born anything. Sexuality and your experiences with sexuality happens as we develop when we're toddlers and and all that stuff, child development. And so he kind of figured that out and he presented that. And so that was the most positive thing of the whole conference. I was like, oh my gosh, like if I ever really want to know the origins of things, or if I ever really want to understand sexuality, I don't have to believe in the lie that I was just like born this way, that it just happens to happen, you know, that something psychological happens in our brain, whether we can help it or not help it. Because I don't believe that like you can choose to be gay. It just happens, you know? But something psychological happens and we can kind of narrow that down. And he kind of taught on that. So I really love Ricky Chalet, love his ministry. Do I agree with everything that he does? No. He was recently targeted in the Pray the Gay Away documentary on Netflix. So I don't agree with everything, but he was a huge help to me personally. And then the negative side of the conferences were that they just like wanted us to play sports and do hiking. And it was a lot of behavioral, um, they wanted us to focus on behavioral changes instead of like introducing us to Jesus. And so this whole time, like once again, I'm not having a deep understanding of like who God is through this experience. And I'm just being told you got to act more manly or you have to stop acting feminine. You got to, in order, like, if you can connect with guys, then you won't want to be gay anymore. So it was a lot of behavioral changes. And I didn't enjoy that. And so, yeah, those were my experiences. I was like, maybe the conversion camps or Exodus ministry, it could have resulted into something really godly and beautiful if they had just put Jesus at the center of it and helped people to encounter the living God, instead of trying to change their behaviors. And I think that was the ultimate downfall.
Hey, it's me, and I'm sorry for interrupting this amazing story, but I just wanted to remind you that we have extra content on Locals that you should check out, like the beginning of this conversation or the after show, which talks about the takeaways and practical applications of the testimonies. Go to almostfalse.locals.com or download the Locals app to get free access, unless you want to be missing out. Anyway, the links are in the description. Now, let's get back to the story. I'd like to go back to that period of time when you got rejected. So, kind of high school years, because during that time, it was a really hard time for you. You were really struggling psychologically, struggling with depression and rejection. And how did you deal with that? And what did you do to kind of escape the reality that you had?
Oh my gosh. Well, the answer is I didn't. I didn't deal with it. I tried to in middle school. I did have like a little stint where I went to a church and there was this prophet pastor guy speaking and he looked at me in the crowd and I was always scared of like those prophet people. My parents, they took us to both charismatic churches and Baptist churches. So I had a good mix of both. So I kind of understood. And the charismatic ones always scared me. They would say out of pocket stuff and do out of pocket stuff. And so this prophet, he came up to me after the service. This was, and I was in middle school. And he said, God has a special anointing on your life. And I was like, okay, dude, like, he's like, I want to meet up with you. Would you allow for me to come to your house and, grab coffee? And I was like, sure. And so he came to my house and then he basically told me what God had been telling him. This was like, I think even maybe I hadn't even come out to my parents yet. And he had told me like, God showed me that you struggle with same-sex attraction. And he's like, but don't worry, like God is going to redeem this in your life. And he's like, God has an incredible plan for you. He's like, you're going to get married. You're going to have, I think he said 2 children, a boy and a girl. Like he just like told me my whole future right in front of me. And he's like, this is going to be a summer that you never forget. You're going to get a car soon. Like everything that he said happened as far as like the recent events. That summer was a summer I never forgot because it was, we did missionary trips and I did a missionary trip to Guatemala. And then shortly after that, I got a car, like he said. And now even in the future, everything that he said, I am literally doing. And I've been able to meet up with this guy even after, there's a lot of people that claim to be prophets and stuff, but like they're not real prophets. I can legitimately say that this man has the prophetic gifting. Like this man read my future. Like there's no other way, like this was like years in advance of things that he saw. A pretty humble guy too. And so from that point, I started getting involved more with the church because I was like, wow, like, if what this guy is saying is true, I should probably, get more involved in church. Started going to like that charismatic church for like the summer, did my mission trip, had an understanding I wanted to live for God, but I just couldn't. I just couldn't put away the feelings. I don't know why. And I think a lot of people struggle with this. I think God just didn't give me the strength for it at that time. It wasn't God's timing because I tried so hard to follow Jesus. Like I think about it and I get emotional. I tried so hard. Like people would ask me, "What are you going to do? With your attraction?" I just told them, "I'm going to live for Jesus. I'm gonna ignore this part of myself." And I was really fighting, but I didn't have like I was still full of ideas and experiences that I wanted to try. And I think that was what was keeping me from believing that God really was good. And so for me, it wasn't the timing yet. I still needed to go through stuff. I still needed to be emptied. I needed to get rid of all these ideas that I had, and I really needed to see that God is good. And the only way that I was going to see if God was good is if I really experienced the depravity of sin and the death that I would encounter within living a life for myself. And so I didn't know how to deal with it during my high school years, and I turned to like pornography. Pornography was huge. So I remember like the first time it was like striking. It was like, oh, like what is this? Like I don't know if I like this. But then like perversion took root in me, and then I began to become perverted, and start liking all these things that I wouldn't even have knowledge had I not even watched porn or thought about those kind of things. And so that's kind of how I dealt with it.
Yeah, and now we get into the time where you actually lost your virginity and you started engaging sexually with these people that you were talking online. So can you explain that story, how it happened, losing your virginity, and how much of an impact that had on you afterwards?
Yeah, so I tried to keep myself pure. I had an understanding, like this is my thing. It's like I wanted to have God, but I wanted to be gay at the same time. It was like I knew about God and I knew I liked his morality, but I wanted to get married and I wanted to be monogamous and like I liked all those things that God brings into the equation. And so I tried to save myself for marriage. And I would go on dates with guys and they just wanted sex. And that was pretty much the same thing over and over. It was just like, let's go on a date. We want to have sex. We want to have sex. So I never gave in until like one time when I was in college. At this point, I was doing dual enrollment. I was, I think like 17 or 18 years old. And I met another guy who was also like 18 or 17. And I just met up with him and I thought he was like super nice. And for some reason, I was very attracted to him. And I thought that he would be my Prince Charming. Like the way that he talked was so smooth and he seemed to really take an interest in me. And I thought he was different than like most guys that I had met in that lifestyle. And so at this point, I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do it, I should just do it. And then I was studying to be an actor too. And so I was like, I need to have this experience because I'm like, I'm doing scenes where people are having sex and stuff. And I don't know what that feels like. I don't know. I don't know how to act that. And so I ended up, having sexual relations with this man. And it was interesting because I was really scared that he was going to leave me afterward. That was like a big fear. And because it had happened to someone that I knew close to me. And I didn't want to go through that. I didn't want to get depressed. I wanted, my Prince Charming. And he actually ended up not just leaving me 2 days later, ignoring my text messages, but I also got a fever. I got sick after we had sex. I think I got tonsillitis. I got tonsillitis from this man. And so I never had that before. I got in like 104-degree fever. I was in bed for like a week. It was horrible. And so I felt like it was the judgment of God like over my life. I was like, God did not want me to have sex, and I had sex anyways. And then that kind of opened me up now more to the idea of like, okay, well, like now I've had sex, so I don't have to wait to have sex. If I meet a guy and I like him, I can just have sex. And that started the trajectory of just like every time I would meet up with guys, I would like try to find my value in them. And then we would ultimately like the dates would just lead to me giving myself up so that I would have sex with them.
And that's when we get into more of the stripping side of things, because those events led you to try to seek a new life and get a new beginning. And you moved to New York. And that's when you got into the stripping part of your story. So can you explain First of all, like really quickly, why you moved to New York and what happened once you moved there.
Yeah, I became a stripper. That's what everybody loves to hear. But no, I mean, I think for me, I was an entertainer. I went to school for acting, and I wanted to be an actor. When I got to New York, I moved to a place where I did not like. I wanted to get away from my parents. I wanted to get away from the religious mindset. I wanted to live life for myself, away from the oppression that I was feeling from my parents, telling me like, you shouldn't be gay, you shouldn't be doing this, and they just didn't accept me. But I went to New York, didn't know anybody, and a drag queen approached me, and I was training at the time. I was a personal trainer while simultaneously trying to act, and she said you should become a stripper, because if you become a stripper, you got a great body, you can meet a lot of people. And I really needed to meet people, besides away from my job and other, I was having a hard time just meeting guys, because I would meet guys and then they would just want to have sex with me. Like literally the first person I ever met in New York was another drag queen, and I had sex with that drag queen. I was just talking about this the other day. It was crazy. Like every person in the gay lifestyle just wanted to have sex. It was insane. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I'll try stripping, and then like maybe I'll be able to make some friends doing that. And it was go-go dancing at first. Well, first I was like a shot boy. And so I was in the club just like handing out shots like in my underwear. But yeah, I went from shop boy to then be working at actual like nightclubs and stripping at the nightclubs. And by stripping, I mean just like in my underwear. And so I had a good time. I had made up a fake name. I was stripping in places like Fire Island, and I was starting to become very popular. Like the queer community in New York is big, but like people know each other. It's the same drag queens, the same event promoters, the same nightclub. And if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like that's like Los Angeles. You know, um, Once you're in with the top people, you can go on to make movies or TV shows or whatever. And so I was like getting to know top people who are on TV and movies and all this stuff within the queer community, and they knew me by my stripper name. They didn't know me by my real name. And it was like a character that I was playing, and that was, taking a toll on me psychologically. But I was also just doing this because I needed money as well. Like rent is expensive and was expensive in New York. I pay like a lot of money for like my apartment in Brooklyn. And when my mom found out that I was a stripper, she cut me off. So I was like, now I need to strip more. So because she's not helping me with rent anymore. And so my poor mom. And so was doing Fire Island gigs. And then I was presented with the opportunity to do like a fully nude gig, which I'd never done before. And I didn't know how I felt about that. There's so much components that go into something like that. Uh, and so I agreed because they said that I would make like $600 in like one night. And I think I remember going to that night, I saw things that I'd never seen before in my life, like Eyes Wide Shut kind of things, if you guys have ever seen that movie. It was weird. It was nasty. It was dirty. It was grungy, grimy. And I did not feel good after doing something like that. I cried on the way to work the next day. I was riding my bicycle on the way to my personal training job. And I just felt like so empty. I felt so hopeless. I had just like, trying to make connections with guys, all they wanted was sex. So just having a bunch of sex, feeling empty. Then going, to these stripping gigs, and then people only looking at my body and not caring about my personality, not caring about me. Like there was no mission, there's no purpose, there's no vision. And I was like, is this life? Is this all that life has to offer? It's just like sex and fame, and I don't understand. I was confused. And so I decided from that point on that I didn't want to strip anymore. I didn't even want to be in New York anymore. I was in New York for 8 months, and I stripped for I think like around like 4 months. I didn't want to do it anymore. And so I tried to find a way out of New York. And then that's when I came upon the opportunity to get a job on a cruise ship. That was my way out. I was like, I'm going to leave. Let's leave. Like Patrick says from SpongeBob. But yeah, that was my escape. Like I was just like trying to find happiness and trying to go to the place that I was ultimately going to be happy in.
That's the story of your life from the beginning. when you kind of wanted to follow God, but you wanted to do these things at the same time, and embracing the culture that tells you need to embrace who you truly are, and you really did that, and that made you feel more and more empty, and that boiled to a point where you couldn't take it anymore after or during the cruise ship. But during these years, it got to a point where you could not continue living this way. Can you explain what happened that night and how that changed your life?
Yeah, I think the lie of the enemy is to have this optimistic mindset that things are just going to get better. The grass is going to be greener on the other side. And I remember a campaign that actually happened when I was a child for LGBTQ and for bullying. And it says, things are going to get better. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. And that was the lie that the enemy was telling me in my mind as I was progressing through all this. Like things were getting worse for me. Like I was starting to use drugs. I was having a lot of sex. I never thought I would be that person. I was becoming a slut. I was stripping. I was doing all these things that I never imagined myself to do. And I didn't consider that to be, very virtuous things. And I just kept telling myself, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. One day you're going to achieve your dreams. One day you're going to find your Prince Charming. And I was getting more abused, more empty, more depressed, more anxious. I was so depressed. I would cry every day. I mean, from when I was in middle school and I accepted that I was, gay, came out of the closet, I would cry. I would cry, cry, cry. I cried so much in my 20s. Um, and so finally, I was so sick of this depression. And I remember I came back home after working on the cruise ship for like 2 months. It didn't really help me. And I was so depressed. I was just like, I'm so over life. I don't have any other, like, I don't see any other point in living. I've done it all. I've traveled the world, been to New York, had a bunch of sex with like over 200 guys, and I don't know where to go from here. I don't think there is somewhere to go from here. And so the only thing that I could think of at that moment was the little bit of sermons that I had seen and watched, from places like Hillsong and, growing up, my parents taking me to church. And I just remembered my mom's voice. And she said to me, sometimes like God is trying to give us a message, but we're not open to that message. Like there's like spiritual powers that we don't even comprehend. So like maybe God wants to speak to us and wants to show us a way, but the devil could be blocking that in some way, or your sin could be blocking that. And so I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to kill myself tomorrow. Like that's it. I'm going to be done with this. But I don't want to go out without giving God a chance. Let me just give God a chance. Because if he's trying to speak to me and he has something important to say, I should at least give him a chance. And so I told God, I said, God, you basically have one night. Like you have one night to really prove to me that you are God and that you care about me and that you love me. And I really need you to show up because tomorrow that's it. I'm done. Like I'm not gonna keep living this rat race. I'm not gonna keep doing the same thing over and over again. Things don't change and my viewpoint doesn't change. And I'm sick of just like having to deal with this attraction, having to be, separated, and being treated badly, and I just knew it wasn't going to get any better. And so I did one thing good, which was I put on some worship music because I really love worship music. And even then, I didn't know a lot of worship music, but I did know like a couple of Hillsong songs. And I just put on this random playlist from like Spotify, and I went to sleep and I said, God, if you're real, you need to show me because tomorrow that's it. And so as I slept, I think the Lord did a supernatural thing in my heart. I can't begin to explain what he did that night to me because it's unexplainable. And so I woke up the next morning and I felt like I had been shot with like testosterone or something. Like I was on like, I don't know how to describe it, like steroids or something. I woke up with like the most happy go lucky energy. I was so happy. I was so thrilled at life. Um, I didn't know what had happened. And I was like, I'm going to take this as a sign because, when you're depressed, you usually like the depression continues the next day. You can't get up in the morning, at least for me. And I felt like I wanted to live life again. And all of my feelings had changed. And so I just went to God and I said, God, like, this must be you. You did something in my heart. the night before, and I said, I want to take a chance. I'm not done fighting yet. I'm going to take a chance on you, God. I'm going to give you my life. Like, I lived my life fully for myself. I want to now live for you. I want to do everything your way. I don't have any reservations. I did everything my way and it didn't work out. It didn't bring me happiness. I was never truly at peace, but I'm going to try it your way. And if you bring me that peace and you continue to, if it's anything like what I'm feeling right now, like I can't explain it, then I'll be good. And so that's the day that I like gave my life to God. And it was a process. I remember literally praying to him and saying, like, I don't know what you think about this gay thing. Whether you approve, whether you don't approve, that's not really important to me. What's important to me is like, I'm going to live for you. And so whether that includes a boyfriend or doesn't include a boyfriend, I don't care. I really don't care at this point. I'm going to live for you regardless. And so I started at that point to study and get deep into God's word. And he gave me like a hunger and a passion and a fire. I mean, this was like insane to me. I mean, how does someone go from living entirely for themselves to then like wanting to study the Bible and wanting to then listening to hours, hundreds of hours of sermons and John Piper sermons and like it was insane debates between Muslims and Christians. I had never in my life cared about any of that stuff. Never even had I feel like I was not even intelligent to be able to comprehend that stuff. I didn't understand the Middle East. I didn't understand war. I didn't understand and I was like soaking everything up like a sponge. It was truly a supernatural work. And then I think around like 3 months or so in, I made like a real commitment. I finally understood that God did not want me to be a gay man. God did not want me to continue to date men. He revealed to me the difference between love and lust, and how I had been in lust with people to try to gain validation and to make meaning in my life and worthiness and value. And when I found that in him, I didn't need a man anymore. And that chain was broken off of my life. And I started like my journey into what I would say would be abstinence.
That's incredible. That's such a beautiful story. And God has a way to take people that are so broken at their lowest and change them supernaturally the next day. And it just takes a heart that truly wants to reach out to him. And that's what you had that night. Because of that desperation, you finally hit the bottom of the barrel, reached out, and he showed you
Mm-hmm.
that he was real. And it's such a polarizing topic in our world, but also within the Christian community. And I want to ask you, how has your relationship with sexuality changed since becoming a Christian? You hinted a little bit to it, but can you expand a little bit on what that looks like now compared to your idea before?
Yeah, I think we make that the main focus. And so like within my testimony, that wasn't the main focus. I was not even concerned about my sexuality at all. And so I know that people are going to listen to this and they're just going to think, well, this is all about sexuality. It was all about Jesus. At no point did I care who was going to date, who was going to marry. I was caring about Jesus. Like I had a real encounter with the living God that night. And then I continued to have more encounters with him. The more I read his word and the more I knew more about his character and how much he loved me and how good he was and what he wanted to do with this world, what he wanted to do with humanity and creation. And so for me with sexuality, he'd shown me like as I got deeper into his character, like I was looking for men's validation. And because I either didn't get that growing up or I just didn't connect with guys or something, I don't know, some psychological thing, right? For if that's, just like financial, freedom or, whatever strong root that was rooted in of every time I would have sex with guys, there was a root there. There was an understanding there. I'm getting something from you, or at least I think I'm getting something from you. So now I was getting something from God. I was receiving love and worthiness and value and security from God. I don't need to go get that from someone else. So I had a purity, like I would say journey of I think it was around 8 months. I didn't watch porn. I didn't, have sex with guys. I was just like totally in love with the Lord. It was like my honeymoon phase with the Lord. Um, at some point at the end of the 8 months, I ended up watching porn again and I fell into temptation. And that was a whole journey. And that's like I can talk about that later, but it was difficult for me. And then I had also encounters with guys again, and I didn't know what to do because I was like, I love God, and why am I still sinning like this? Every time it would happen, I would repent, and then I would, go for months without doing anything, and then maybe, an opportunity would present itself, and then I would fall again. And so I'm not a saint in that way. If people think I have sinless perfection, I don't. I had my tumbles, and I fell a lot of times. And I asked God, why did this happen to me? Why couldn't I just continue to be pure for more than 8 months? Why did I have problems with pornography, had problems with sex? Because at this point, it wasn't like I wanted a relationship. I was just horny, right? I got horny. I was like in my 20s, you know. This was anywhere from 22 to the age that I am now, which is 28. All throughout that time, I was dealing with like just being horny and having tempting situations. And I told God, I'm like, why are you allowing this to happen? Like, I know you can heal me. I know you can take away the attraction. I don't need to like be with men anymore. Why don't you do it? I don't understand. Like, you did it for those 8 months. Like, is it my fault? Am I doing something wrong? Did I let something into my life? And he spoke a very defining word to me. He said, how will you ever be able to help other people if you have never experienced this yourself? And it is so true. I have helped so many people with pornography. I've had so much empathy. I had become a very like almost like a Pharisee. I had this like righteous mentality of like God changed my life, and like I'm sorry that you can't stop watching porn, or like I'm sorry that you still deal with depression. Like I don't have to take medication anymore. Like the Lord set me free. Like I had this mentality of like the Lord was doing incredible things in my life, but that's not the way that He works. He's a God of process. He's a God of transformation and sanctification. There's a process to things. Sometimes you will need medication. Sometimes, like it is going to take, some emotional healing and some physical, some emotional therapy, to break free of habits. And so I believe God was allowing me to go through those things so that one day I would be able to help people, so that when people are like trying to get out of the lifestyle, they don't give up the minute that they have sex with a guy. I could be like, I've been there myself, don't give up, keep going. That was just your old mind, your old flesh. This is how you can overcome in this way. This is how I overcame. Spend more time with the Lord. I spent, time in worship. I didn't let my guilt and my shame stop me from connecting with God. And so throughout the years, I've gotten better at that. I've learned how to have fellowship with God instead of be given fellowship with God. God is so merciful. In that honeymoon stage, He just gives it to us. He's like we're like children. He'll just like, here you go, super easy. I'm here right behind you in life, taking you through all these things. When we get a little older, He's like, now you're gonna have to work for it a little bit. You're gonna have to learn how to do this so that you can ultimately serve people in your life. Life with Jesus is about servitude. It's about literally serving one another. How will you serve someone if you never can relate to them, if you don't know how to help them? And that's why God was allowing these things. And through this process of sanctification, I've gotten better, and I'm still working on myself. And so these things have propelled me to continue to be like, there's still sin in my life, and I need to work on that. I need to get better. I need to educate myself. I've done like emotional healing series now. I know everything about like I think they call it the limbic system or the lymphatic system. I don't remember. It's like the nervous system in your body, like
Mm-hmm.
how it deals with traumas, how to get rid of traumas. And I've been through all those things because life with Jesus has been about learning and about how I can serve other people. And so when it just comes to my sexuality, I do want to have kids. I do want to get married. I do want a wife. I don't know when that will be. If the Lord wants that for me, He's going to bring it to me. I have full trust in Him for that. And if He doesn't, then I will live fine completely on my own. Like, I'm not going to try to make that happen because I don't need anything else other than God. I don't need marriage. I just need God. When I'm single, I just need God. Would it be easier? Yes, it would be easier. But I just need Him. He's the lover of my life. He's the lover of my soul. And He can fulfill me and satisfy me in every way possible, through my community, through my friendships, through fellowship with Him, through pastoring, through purpose. And so that's kind of where I stand now. I'm like abstinent, trying to be abstinent, continuing to learn from my falls, and and try to be a better pastor, a better leader, a better teacher to everyone around me, and to continue to serve people.
That's such an important message. Thank you for saying that. And if there's somebody listening that thinks that, Christians are perfect, that's not true. We all have issues to deal with, and you explained that it's a process of sanctification, and it really is. But God moved in your life in a way that it did not matter how hard it was. You were still going to seek him, and you fell and you came back to him. And that's how you know that the true living God really encountered you, because you were able to overcome these stumbles, these challenges, because of your love for him. So I really do appreciate you talking about this.
And I also, I want to say something really quick. I was the only one doing this at this time. There was no ministry. There was no pastor helping me. I didn't have any mentor. I didn't know, like, I was figuring this out alone with God. And so God really carried me. And that's what I do. That's why I do what I do today. I started my YouTube channel, and I'm trying to write a book, and I do teachings, and I make videos, because I didn't have the experience where I could look at someone else and say, wow, they've gone through this and they've learned through this. And I had to learn all of that by myself with the Lord. There still are very few ministries that are even doing stuff. And that's what propels me to make a difference today. Is I don't when people come out of that lifestyle, what are the resources? What are they going to have? Who's going to help them? And I don't want to help people in that way. I didn't want to be the picture of ex-gay, I never set out to do that. But I did it because I didn't want anyone to be in my position and feel alone. And I think that if I do that, then there will be other people who will also do that as well. And just kind of pioneering that especially for this new generation.
Amen. And to finish off this interview, I want to ask you, if you had a message for someone who is looking for love in the LGBTQ community, what would it be?
I would say you can look and you can try to find. I know I did. I tried. No matter what someone told me, I was persistent in believing that I was going to find true love, and that I was going to find true happiness in a relationship with another man, or in, having confidence in my gender, or, whatever it is that you struggle with. But there is no true love, true sacrifice, true peace, true understanding until we connect with our Creator, until we connect with the God who made us. And he wants to love you. He wants to be that you're searching for. So many of you guys are just wanting desperately to find that connection with another person. But I'm here to tell you that a person will never know you the way that God knows you. A person can try to be like God, but they are not God. They don't have the capabilities that our humble God, who came down to die for our sins, to take the price of death. A person doesn't have that capability without God. So to me, true love looks like dying for the person that you love and making sacrifices to the fullest extent of they have nothing to gain from you. When you're in a relationship with a man or a woman, they do have something to gain. They're gaining happiness, and they're gaining sex, or they're gaining your partnership. God didn't have anything to gain when he came to save us. And to me, that's true love. And that's the kind of love that I want to accept for my life, is one that there's no ulterior motive. I don't make God happy. He doesn't do this because he's attracted to me. He does this just because he is love. And I really hope that you guys come to understand God as love the way that I have, that is so transformed your life.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Almost False podcast. If you want to hear the beginning of this conversation, head over to Locals, where we post the unreleased footage from our interviews, where we also have the after show in which you can get to know our guests more personally and hear about what their life is like now. The link is in the description. Have a great day and stay blessed.